Outpost Sigma-12 hung on the edge of nothing, a scarred ring of alloy and rock orbiting a dead star that hadn't bothered to shine in 3 million years. The astronomers back on Terra called it a black dwarf. The grunts called it the grave lantern. Either way, it was the perfect place to forget you were still alive. Sergeant Kai. Morgan pressed his gloved palms against the observation blister and stared into the void. 32 years old, beard gone salt and pepper from too many nights under recycled air, eyes the color of burnt gun oil. He had not seen natural sunlight in 411 days. He counted them the way monks once counted rosary beads. Behind him the corridor. Lights flickered in their usual epileptic rhythm power grid, bleeding out again. Somewhere deeper in the rock, Reactor 3 coughed like an old smoker. The outpost had been built to house 2,000 souls. 43 remained. 43 Terran legionnaires who still wore the crimson stripe of the 117th Expeditionary. Who still answered roll call at 0600. Who still believed the war was on. Kai's breath fogged the transparisteel. Out there, past the debris fields and the skeletal wrecks of the first and second battles of the Rift, the enemy should have been massing. The Kelthar Dominion never rested. Their hive ships moved like cathedral-sized manta rays, silent until the moment they tore reality open with their lancer rays. Every morning for the last 18 months, Kai had expected to see them blotting out the starfield. Every morning he saw nothing. He hated the nothing worse than the fighting. Coffee, Sarge? Private First Class Amira Reza stepped through the hatch, balancing 2 bulging pouches of something that smelled like scorched plastic and regret. 24 years old, born on the Luna shipyards, the kind of woman who could strip a rail carbine blindfolded and still quote Persian poetry while doing it. She had a new scar across her left cheek, shrapnel from the last push, the one that took Lieutenant Galt and half of 2nd Squad. Kai took the pouch without looking away from the dark. Tastes like battery acid. Close, it's recycled battery coolant with a hint of despair. She leaned beside him, shoulder to shoulder the way soldiers do when words feel too heavy. You feel it too, don't you? The quiet's wrong. He nodded once. Cum's blackouts lasted 211 days. That's not jamming anymore. That's a graveyard. Amira's fingers brushed the small silver cross she wore under her fatigue's old habit, older faith. My grandmother used to say silence is where God hides when he's planning something big. Kai snorted soft. Your grandmother never met the Kale. She met worse, Amira said. Colonists on Ganymede, during the water riots, said the same silence fell right before the Marines dropped in and pulled 2,000 kids out of the fire. She paused. Maybe he's planning again. Kai didn't answer. He wanted to believe her. God knew he wanted to. But wanting and believing were 2 different wars, and he had already lost too many. A klaxon cut the thought in half, 3 short, 1 long. Contact alert. Both of them moved without thinking. Boots hammered down the spinal corridor, past murals someone had painted in better years, wolves howling at Earthrise, the Virgin of Guadalupe rendered in powered armor white and gold. The murals were chipped now, bullet-pocked, but no one had the heart to paint over them. Command deck was a cathedral of flickering hollows and sweating metal. Captain Elias Thorne stood at the center, 70 years old and still built like a freight loader, one eye replaced by a red targeting optic that never quite synced with the other. The remaining flesh eye was fixed on the main tactical display. A single ship hung in the battle space, 300 clicks out and closing slow. No transponder. No IFF. Just a sleek silver dart broadcasting on an open channel humans hadn't used since the ceasefire talks began. 2 years ago, Thorne's voice cracked like gravel. They're hailing us. Human voice. Says he's from Fleet Command. A ripple went through the room. Someone whispered Christ's name like a prayer and a curse at once. Kai felt his stomach drop through the deck plates. Play it. The speaker crackled. A man's voice, exhausted, formal, the kind of voice that had read too many casualty lists. This is Rear Admiral Chinwei. Terran Joint Fleet, broadcasting in the clear to any surviving units in the Sigma Rift. The war is over. Repeat, the war ended 211 days ago. The Treaty of Arcturus was signed in neutral space. Hostilities ceased at 1400 Zulu. The 18th of March 2237. All units are ordered to stand down and await repatriation. Acknowledge. Static. Then again, softer. Please acknowledge, anyone. You could have heard a round chamber in that silence. Thorn looked at Kai. Kai looked at the 42. Faces around him, faces carved thin by ration packs and sleeplessness. Faces that had watched friends burn inside their own armor. Faces that had learned to hate the enemy so thoroughly it had become a kind of prayer. Private Park spoke first. Voice trembling with something between laughter and tears. They're lying. It's a trick. Kelthorpe Seops. They've done it before. Corporal Singh shook his head slow. That was a human voice, Parky. Accent from New Beijing. My cousin sounded just like that. Amira's hand rested on her sidearm. Even if it's real, what do we do? Just switch it off? After everything? Kai stared at the silver ship on the display. It hadn't powered weapons. Hadn't raised shields. It just waited, patient as a coffin. He thought of the children on Epsilon Station who'd been spaced when the Kale breached the hull. Thought of the transmission from the Drake, last words of a dying captain, begging someone, anyone, to hold the line. Thought of the promise he'd made over the open grave of Second Squad. We will not break. His voice, when it came, was quiet iron. We verify. Thorn raised an eyebrow. How? We let them dock. 1 shuttle. 2 personnel. Full decon. If they're human, they'll understand why we can't just believe. And if they're not? Kai met his captain's gaze. Then we give them the welcome they deserve. A murmur of approval rippled through the deck. Not joy, not relief. Just the old, terrible certainty that had kept them alive this long. Thorn nodded once. Do it. Kai keyed the come himself. Unidentified vessel. This is Outpost Sigma-12 actual. Single shuttle approach only. Docking Bay 3. Any deviation and we open fire. Acknowledge. A pause that felt like years. Sigma-12. This is Shuttle Mercy 9. Acknowledged. 2 souls aboard. No weapons. Coming to you now. A softer voice, almost lost. Thank God someone's still out here. Kai killed the channel. Amira looked at him, eyes shining too bright. You think it's really over, Sarge? He watched the silver dart begin its burn toward them, slow and trusting. And felt something cold crawl up his spine. I think, he said. The war taught us never to trust peace when it comes wearing a smile. Alarms dimmed to standby amber. 43 soldiers checked rifles that hadn't been fired in weeks. Somewhere in the chapel compartment, someone began to sing low, off-key. The old hymn about the sheep and the shepherd. Kai closed his eyes for 1 second and tried to remember what peace even felt like. He could in single quotes t. Far behind the approaching shuttle. So distant the outpost scopes registered it only as a heat shimmer against the grave lantern's corpse light. Something vast and cathedral-shaped unfolded from the dark, and the humans, lost in their vigil, did not see it yet. Docking Bay 3 smelled of scorched insulation and old blood that never quite scrubbed it out of the deck plates. The overhead floods were dialed to surgical white, turning every face the color of bone. 40 rifles tracked the shuttle as its landing struts hissed metal with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Kai stood front and center, helmet sealed, visor opaque so no one could read his eyes. Behind him the platoon formed 2 silent ranks, living statues carved from fatigue and suspicion. Captain Thorn waited to his left, arms folded. The red optic in his skull cycling like a heartbeat. The ramp lowered. Two figures stepped out. The first was a woman. Mid-40s, hair cropped short and going iron gray. Uniform so crisp it looked alien in this place. Rear Admiral Chen Wei, her collar stars glinted like accusations. She carried no sidearm. Her hands were open, palms forward, the universal gesture of someone who had never needed to prove they were harmless before. The second was a man in medical whites, younger, eyes wide behind corrective lenses that had no business surviving frontier duty. He clutched a slate to his chest like a shield. Chun stopped 5 meters from Kai and studied the wall of rifles the way a surgeon studies a tumor. "Sergeant Morgan," she said. Her voice was the same one from the broadcast, tired, precise, human. "I read your service jacket on the way in. 3 confirmed Hive Queen kills. You held Ridge 7 with 12 men for 41 hours. The Legion still teaches that stand at officer candidate school." Kai didn't lower his weapon. "Ma'am, with respect. Jackets can be faked." A flicker of something pain maybe crossed her face. "Yes, they can." She reached slowly into her pocket. 40 fingers tightened on triggers. She withdrew a small, battered holocube and tossed it underhand. It landed with a clink at Kai's boots. He glanced down without bending. The cube projected a frozen image, the Treaty of Arcturus. Human and Kelther delegates side by side beneath the banners of 20 species. Date stamp clear as a scar, the 18th of March 2237, 211 days ago. Amira's voice came over the private channel, thin with wonder. "Facial recognition confirms every delegate. That's not deep fake work, Sarge. That's real-time verification from the Martian archives." Chun spoke again, softer. "We lost half the fleet getting to that table, Sergeant. Half, including the Invictus. Your brother was on her." The words hit Kai like a rail slug to the sternum. He had never told anyone Connor served on Invictus. Not even Amira. The roster had been classified above his clearance. His visor finally cleared. Chun met his stare without flinching. "I'm sorry," she said. He was KIA defending the delegation shuttle. Posthumous solar cross. I pinned it on his coffin myself. Silence stretched so tight it could have cut hull dashplate. Kai lowered his rifle a fraction. "Why are you here, Admiral? Why not just broadcast the stand-down order and be done?" "Because the Kelther asked us not to." She let that settle. "They said some units were too far out, too damaged. That forcing the news on them cold might break what was left. They asked us to come in person. Said it was a matter of honor." Private Park spat on the deck. "Honor from the bugs that glass New Kyoto." Chun didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on Kai. "I know what they did. I was at New Kyoto, lost my daughter there." Her voice cracked, just once, then steadied. "But the war is over, Sergeant. And if we keep killing each other out of habit, then everything she died for turns to ash." Kai felt the deck tilt under him, the way it does when the grav plates stutter. He looked at the 42 faces behind him, faces that had become family in the way only shared graves can forge. He saw the question in their eyes. Do we dare believe? He knelt, slow, and picked up the holocube. The treaty document scrolled under his thumb. Article 17, Immediate Cessation of Hostilities. Article 22, Safe Passage and Repatriation for all stranded units. Article 29, Joint Defense Pact against extragalactic threats. Extra-galactic. The words tasted like rust. "Admiral," he said carefully, "permission to speak freely?" "Granted. You come here telling us the war's over, that the Kelthers suddenly grew consciences, and in the same breath you mention extragalactic threats. Forgive me if I smell a bigger trap." Chun's shoulders sagged, just a fraction. The exhaustion in her was suddenly visible, like a curtain pulled back. "You're not wrong to be paranoid, Sergeant. Paranoia kept you alive. But the Kelther aren't the threat anymore. She turned to the doctor beside her. "Show them." The medic tapped his slate. A new holla bloomed above the deck-deep space telescope footage, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Something vast moved between galaxies, a structure the size of a solar system, geometry that hurt to look at directly. Light bent around it like water on the stone. The room went very still. Chun's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner. "They call themselves the Harrow. They're coming from the voids between galactic clusters. The Kelthar detected them first, lost 3 hive fleets, just getting a look. They came to us because we're the only species crazy enough to fight something that big and not run." Amira laughed, a short, broken sound. "So the bugs want an alliance. And we're supposed to just forget the last 20 years? "No," Chun said. "We're supposed to remember them. And decide if we want our children to die the same way." Kai stared at the impossible shape crawling across the void. His mind flashed to Connor's last letter smuggled out before Invictus sorted. "If we fall, make sure someone's still standing when the real dark comes." He looked at his platoon. At Thorne's scarred face. At Amira clutching her cross so hard the chain cut her skin. At Private Park, whose sister had been on New Kyoto when the sky burned, he thought. Unbidden, of his mother's voice when he was 8 years old. Reading from an ancient book by candlelight during a Martian dust storm. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Kai exhaled, long and slow. "Admiral," he said, "my people haven't had a hot meal in 4 months. Haven't seen a friendly face in over a year. We're low on ammo, lower on hope, and we've buried so many friends the rocks outside are more cemetery than asteroid. You want us to trust you?" He stepped forward until they were less than a meter apart. "Then you'll trust us first." He raised his rifle, reversed it, and offered it grip first to Chun. "Take this. All of you stack arms. We'll do the same. Then we talk. No ranks, no flags. Just soldiers who've bled too much to lie to each other anymore." Chun looked at the weapon like it might bite her. Then slowly she took it. Her hands shook just once. One by one, rifles clattered to the deck. The sound echoed like bones settling into a grave. Thorn was the last. He stared at Kai for a long moment, something ancient and proud in his eyes, then laid his own weapon down. Chun set Kai's rifle atop the pile. When she straightened, there were tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Kai felt the weight of 2 decades slide off his shoulders and crash to the floor. For the first time in years, he could breathe. Amira stepped forward, unclasped her cross, and pressed it into Chun's hand. "For your daughter," she said. Chun closed her fist around it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. In the silence that followed, the deck trembled not from engines, but from something deeper. A subsonic thrum that rattled teeth and set the lights flickering. Kai frowned. "That's not the reactor." The doctor's slate screamed an alert. New contacts, dozens, then hundreds, pouring out of the rift like hornets from a kicked nest. Kael'tar signatures, warships, full battle spread. Chun went pale. "That's not our escort. Those are Dominion hardliners. They never accepted the treaty." Kai looked at the pile of rifles, then at the 43 half-starved legionnaires, who had just laid down their guns for the first time in years. He smiled small. "Tired and utterly without mercy. Looks like the war isn't over after all," he said. He picked up his rifle. Worked the action. And the sound was the sweetest music he'd ever heard. "Welcome to Sigma-12, Admiral. Hope you're ready to fight for your peace." Far above them, the first lance beams carved white scars across the dark. And the outpost woke up screaming. The lights died all at once, plunging Docking Bay 3 into blood-red emergency strips. Sirens howled the old song, "Condition Black," enemy in weapons range. The sound was homecoming and funeral rolled into one. Kai was already moving. Stack arms is cancelled. He roared, positions. Go, go, go. 43 bodies snapped into motion with the fluid terror of people who had rehearsed hell, so often it felt like choreography. Rifles found hands. Helmets sealed with the hiss of lovers reuniting. Chun and the doctor were swept up in the current Amira, grabbing the admiral by the arm and hauling her toward the inner blast doors like a mother dragging a child from a burning house. Kai slapped the manual override. Bulkheads slammed down behind them with the finality of guillotines. Thorne's voice crackled over the command net, calm as winter steel. All stations, this is actual. We are weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. Give them the welcome they came for. Kai sprinted for the spinal maglev, boots hammering metal. The outpost was waking up, angry turrets grinding out of decades-old cradles, rail coils spooling with the rising whine of angels sharpening swords. Sigma-12 had been built as a trap, a kill box disguised as a listening post. Someone, long ago, had bet everything on the idea that humans would never surrender a square meter of space without making the enemy bleed for it. They were about to collect on that bet. He burst onto main battery control cathedral deck. The grunts called it because the spinal rail cannon looked like a pipe organ forged from wrath. Gunners were already strapped in, visors down, fingers dancing across firing. Rooms older than most nations. Gunnery. Chief O'Malia, red-haired Irish woman who'd once been a nun before the war made her better at killing than praying, didn't look up from her. Scope, 32 hive cruisers, 8 super dreadnoughts, and one very pissed-off matriarch carrier, she announced cheerfully. Range 150 clicks and closing. They're pinning us with surrender demands in Old Kale. Shall I tell them to shove it? Kai dropped into the tactical throne beside her. Tell them in the language they understand. O'Malley grinned like Christmas morning. With pleasure, Sergeant. The first salvo left the rails at 0.3 tungsten spears wrapped in magnetic sheaths. Space itself seemed to inhale. 32 streaks of man-made lightning crossed the void and punched through the lead cruiser's shields as if they were tissue. Secondary explosions blossomed orange and beautiful. The Kelther answered with lance, fire-coherent gamma beams that could slice a moon in half. Sigma-12's armor drank the first hits, bleeding heat into the rock. Screaming in frequencies only dogs and dying men could hear. Kai felt the impacts through the deck, like a second heartbeat. On the auxiliary display, Chun stood in the corridor outside, face pale but composed, clutching Amira's cross so hard her knuckles were white. Admiral, Kai said over open channel, you said the war was over. Convince me again. Her laugh was brittle. I was wrong. Some wars don't end until the last believer dies. Then let's make them regret waking us up. He switched to all hands. His voice filled every corridor, every bunker, every chapel corner where someone was whispering Latin under their breath. Listen up. 117th. They came back to finish what they started. They think 200 days of silence made us soft. They forgot one thing. He paused, let the deck shake beneath another lance strike. We never stopped being at war. We just ran out of targets. A roar answered him, 43 voices braided into one animal sound that rattled bulkheads. Kai leaned forward. Cathedral deck fire for effect. All batteries, rapid cycle. Let's remind them why the rift is called humanity's graveyard. The outpost spoke then. Every gun that still had ammunition, every mine that still had a warhead, every forgotten drone with a reactor hot enough to ram. Sigma-12 became a porcupine of light and fury, in the middle of it. Kai caught a glimpse of something impossible on the long-range scope. The matriarch Carrier 3. Kilometers of living chitin and cathedral bone was cracking open along its spine. Not from damage. deliberately. Something inside it was waking up. O'Malley saw it too. "Sweet Mother of God," she whispered. "That's not a ship. That's an ark." The feed zoomed. Within the carrier's ribcage hung a sphere of black glass larger than a battlecruiser, veined with gold light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kai felt the hairs on his neck rise. He had seen that design in classified briefings. Kelthar doomsday weapon, never deployed. The choir stone, supposed to sing every human mind within a light year into permanent catatonia. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to erase. Amira's voice cut across the chaos. Breathless from running, she had dragged Chun and the doctor to Cathedral Deck, refusing to let the Admiral die anywhere but where she could see the stars. "Sarge," she panted, "tell me we have a plan bigger than shoot until we're dead." Kai stared at the choir stone blooming open like a flower made of nightmares. "We do," he said quietly. "We die loud enough that someone else doesn't have to." Chun stepped forward, eyes fixed on the stone. "There's another way. The treaty fleet, my fleet, is only 6 hours behind me. If we can hold until 6 hours?" O'Malley laughed. "We'll be atoms in 6 minutes." Kai's mind raced the way it always did when death was close enough to smell clear. Cold, almost gentle. He looked at the reactor status board. Core 3 was already redlining. Containment failing in 19 minutes. He looked at the choir stone. He looked at the 43 faces that had become his universe, and he smiled the way men do when they finally understand what they were born for. "Chief O'Malley," he said, "divert all coolant to the spinal rail. Overcharge the coils. I want that cannon to fire one last time like God himself is pulling the trigger." O'Malley's eyes widened. "You'll breach the core." "Exactly." Chun understood first. "You're going to ram the stone with the entire outpost." "No, Admiral," Kai said softly. "We're going to remind the universe that humans don't surrender real estate. We burn it down first." He opened the all hands again. "Brothers and sisters of the 117th, the war never ended for us because we never let it. Today we finish what we started. Today we make them remember why they were afraid of us in the first place." Silence. Then Private Park's voice, thick with tears and pride. "See you on the other side." "Sarge." One by one they checked in 43 names. 43 farewells that sounded like wedding vows. Amira stepped close, pressed her forehead to his helmet. "I always knew I'd die beside you," she whispered. "Just thought it would be old age." Kai kissed the brow of her helmet, clumsy through the visor. "Save me a seat at the table, poet." He turned to Chun. "Admiral, you came to bring us home. Take the doctor. Take the shuttle. Tell them what we did." Chun started to protest. Kai cut her off with a look that had stopped charging Kelthar in their tracks. "That's an order." For the first time, she saluted a sergeant. O'Malley's hands flew across the console. The spinal rail began to sing high, rising, the sound of creation tearing itself apart. The outpost lurched as thrusters meant for station keeping fired at full burn. Sigma-12 turned its scarred face toward the choir stone and began to accelerate. Kai strapped into the command throne. Fingers steady. On the main screen the stone opened fully and the song began low, beautiful. The kind of sound that could unmake souls. Kai closed his eyes. He thought of Connor laughing on a Martian playground. He thought of his mother's voice reading Psalms by candlelight. He thought, "This can't all be an accident. Someone wanted us to be here. Someone wanted us to choose." He opened the channel one last time. "Sigma-12 to all stations," he said, and his voice was calm, almost gentle. "Tell the Harrow they'll have to go through us first." The outpost roared forward. A dying star wrapped in human defiance. Behind it, Shuttle Mercy 9 burned hard for open space, carrying 2 witnesses and a silver cross stained with someone else's blood. Ahead, The choir stone waited, vast and hungry, and in the final second before impact, every speaker on the outpost, every every intercom, every broken radio in every forgotten corridor began to broadcast a single human voice. Raw and off-key, singing the hymn the chapel had started hours ago. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The rock met the song. Light filled the rift like the birth of a new sun, and somewhere in the silence that followed, the universe itself seemed to pause and listen. The explosion should have ended everything. Multi-gigaton bloom of plasma and shattered stone, bright enough to cast shadows on the far side of the grave lantern's corpse. For one perfect heartbeat, the rift was day-lit. Every drifting wreck and frozen corpse illuminated like sinners at judgment. Then came the dark again. Deeper than before. Shuttle Mercy 9 tumbled end over end. Thrusters cold, hull cracked in a dozen places. Rear Admiral Chen Wei floated in the cockpit, blood orbiting her face in perfect crimson spheres. The doctor was unconscious, strapped to the co-pilot seat, breathing in wet hitches. Emergency lighting painted everything the color of old. Bruises. Chun's hands found the manual controls. Fingers numb, she fired the attitude jets in short, desperate bursts until the spinning stopped. The viewport steadied on the place where Sigma-12 had been. There was nothing left. Larger than a dinner plate, she stared until her eyes burned, until the tears refused to fall in 0G and just clung to her lashes like shame. A soft chime. Long-range passive array picking up something. Chun wiped her face with the back of his sleeve, smearing blood across her cheek like war paint. She zoomed the scope. Debris, endless debris. And in the center of it all, one impossible heat signature, small, stubborn, moving under its own power, a Terran Legion drop pod. Armor blackened, one maneuvering fin sheared off, but still burning retrograde like it had somewhere better to be. Chun laughed. The sound scared her. It was half sob, half prayer. She opened a tight beam. Unknown pod, this is Mercy 9, identify. Static. Then a voice she knew better than her own heartbeat, hoarse, cracked, but alive. Mercy 9, this is Sigma-12 actual. Sergeant Kai Morgan sending. Tell the Admiralty their cemetery's got a vacancy. Chun's hands shook so badly she nearly lost the beam. Kai. How? God's got a sense of humor, Admiral. And O'Malley is a damned liar, she said. 19 minutes to breach. Took 22. In the background she heard cheering raw, animal. The sound of people who had already died once and decided death was overrated. Chun closed her eyes. Thank you. She didn't know who she was thanking. It didn't matter. Status? She managed. 14 souls, 1 working pod, half a magazine of sidearm ammo, and the worst hangover in history. Also, Amira singing hymns in 3 languages and refuses to stop. Send a tug. Chun laughed again, and this time the tears fell free. Copy that, Sergeant. Tug inbound. 6 hours. Make it 5, Kai said. Kelther matriarch's still out there, and she's pissed. The scope confirmed it. The carrier had survived, shields flickering, hull cracked open like a gutted whale, but alive. And from its broken womb, smaller shapes were spilling, boarding torpedoes, hundreds of them, arrowing toward the debris field. They were hunting survivors. Chun's laugh died. Kai, they're coming for you. A pause. Then his voice, calm as deep water. Let them come. We still got 1 trick left. She wanted to scream at him to run, to hide, to live. Instead she heard herself ask, what trick? The kind that ends wars. The channel clicked off. In the pod, Kai unstrapped from the crash couch. The interior was a slaughterhouse, blood on every surface, bones broken and reset wrong by the G-forces. 14 left out of 43. The names of the missing sat in his mouth like stones. Amira floated beside him. Left arm cradled against her chest, Compound fracture. But her eyes were bright with the old fire. You lied to the Admiral, she said softly. We don't have a trick. Kai pulled a small battered device from his harness, a dead man switch wired to the pod's reactor core. Red light pulsing slow. We do, he said. Same one we always had. Amira looked at the switch, then at him. Understanding dawned gentle and terrible. You beautiful bastard, she whispered. You want to turn ourselves into a second sun. Smaller yield, he said. But right in their teeth when they open the hatch. They'll never see it coming. Private Park, face swollen with burns, laughed until he coughed blood. Poetic, they came to erase us. We erased them right back. One by one, the survivors locked eyes. No one spoke the vote. They didn't need to. They had voted the moment they chose to live through the first explosion. Captain Thorne's spine broken. Still strapped to the command chair, lifted a trembling hand in salute. My only regret, he rasped, is I won't get to see their faces. Kai knelt beside him. You will, sir. Front row seat. Thorne's good eye fixed on him. Make it count, son. Yes, sir. Kai floated to the main hatch. Outside, the first boarding torpedo latched on with a clang that echoed through the pod like a death knell. Cutting torches began to glow orange. Amira started singing again low. Steady, the same hymn that had ridden Sigma-12 into the fire. Others joined. 14 voices, cracked and perfect. Kai thumbed the dead man switch to armed. The red light went steady. He looked at his family, his ragged, impossible family, and felt something vast and quiet settle over him. Not fear, not even sorrow. Peace. The torch finished its circle. The hatch blew inward on shaped charges. Kelthar warriors poured through 8 feet of chitin and blade. Compound eyes reflecting the humans like broken mirrors. The lead warrior raised a plasma lance. Kai smiled. Wrong address, he said. He released the switch. For the second time in an hour. The rift lit up like God had flipped a switch. Mercy 9 was far enough away, this time that the flash only blinded the sensors for a moment. When the scopes cleared, the matriarch carrier was a torn flower of fire. Its escorts scattered. Like leaves in a storm. Chunwei stared at the emptiness where 14 humans had just rewritten the definition of sacrifice. She became aware she was praying words her mother had taught her in a language half the galaxy had forgotten. On. The passive array. A new signal, strong, clear, friendly IFF. The treaty fleet dropping out of fold space hours early. Guns already hot. Leading the van was a ship Chun knew well, the heavy cruiser Invictus Reborn. Someone had painted a fresh crimson stripe on her prow and the words, for Sigma-12. The fleet opened fire as one organism. The remaining Kelthar hardliners lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the rift was quiet again. Truly quiet this time. Chun guided Mercy 9 into the Invictus's boat bay under the eyes of 1,000 silent crew. When the ramp lowered, a Marine honor guard waited, rifles reversed. Tears cutting channels through soot. At their head stood a young lieutenant with Connor Morgan's eyes. He saluted Chun with a hand that trembled only slightly. Ma'am, he said. Voice rough, the Admiralty sends its compliments. And asks what the hell just happened out here. Chun looked past him to the stars, beyond the force field stars that looked different now. Brighter somehow. She thought of 14 voices singing in the dark. She thought of a sergeant who had died twice to keep his promise. Tell them, she said, that the war tried to end without us. Humanity disagreed. The lieutenant's eyes widened. Around him the Marines began to smile, small, fierce, unstoppable smiles. Far away, in the debris field that had once been Outpost Sigma-12, a single piece of alloy tumbled end over end. On it, someone had etched words with a combat knife before the final fire. We held the line. The metal caught the light of distant engines and flashed once like a promise kept. And somewhere, in the vast and quiet dark. Something that might have been mercy or justice, or simply the stubborn refusal of the universe to let courage go unanswered. Listen. The war was over, but the humans, as always, kept fighting anyway. The rift was quiet for the first time in 23 years. No lances, no rail slugs, no dying reactors screaming across the spectrum. Just the slow tumble of wreckage and the soft white glow of rescue beacons drifting like fireflies. Heavy cruiser Invictus Reborn hung at the center of the recovery grid, floodlights carving tunnels through the dark. Recovery drones moved in precise ballet, tagging fragments, cataloging the dead. Every piece of Sigma-12 was being gathered, measured, mourned. Kai Morgan floated inside a medbay cocoon aboard Invictus, wrapped in smart gel and morphine dreams. The doctor said he shouldn't be alive. Third-degree plasma burns over 70% of his body. Lungs cooked by superheated air. Heart stopped twice on the table. They kept using the word miracle in their reports, then deleting it because the fleet didn't believe in miracles, only in statistics. Kai believed in both. He drifted in and out of the dark, chasing ghosts. Connor laughing on a red playground, Amira singing off-key in Farsi and Latin at the same time. Captain Thorne's last salute. Each time he surfaced, a different face waited. First, it was Rear Admiral Chun Wei, still wearing the same blood-stained uniform. Silver cross now on a chain around her neck instead of Amira's. "You're not allowed to die, Sergeant," she told him, voice raw. "I have promotions to give and courts-martial to threaten." "Pick one." He tried to smile. It hurt. "Yes, ma'am." Then it was the young lieutenant with Connor's eyes, Jacob Morgan, his nephew, the one he'd never met because war had eaten the years. Jacob held his hand like it was made of glass. "Uncle Kai," he whispered. "They're calling it the second burning of Sigma. They're already writing songs." Kai's voice was a croak through the breathing mask. "Tell them to wait. Haven't decided if I'm done yet." Jacob laughed until he cried. The third time it was a priest. Old, scarred, wearing the black collar of the Legion chaplains under combat armor. He smelled of incense and cordite. He laid a hand on Kai's forehead, gentle as snowfall. "You held the gate, my son," he said in Latin. "The rest of us get to walk through because you refused to let it close." Kai closed his eyes. "Didn't do it alone, Father. No saint ever does. They gave him new skin grown from his own stem cells. New lungs printed on the ship's bioforge. They even tried to give him a new heart, but the old one started beating again on its own the moment they played a recording of Amira as him over the ward speakers." The doctors stopped deleting the word miracle. 3 weeks later, he stood on his own legs in the ship's chapel, small, cramped, built into what had once been a missile tube. Someone had painted the bulkheads with icons: Saint Michael in powered armor, the Virgin of Guadalupe with a rail rifle across her lap, Christ wearing a Legion beret. 14 names were etched into a plaque of black stone salvaged from Sigma-12 itself. Kai read them one by one, fingers tracing the letters like rosary beads. Amira Reza, Elias Thorne, Shauvan Omali Habir Park. And 10 more. He didn't cry. He had run out of water somewhere between the second and third death. Sheen found him there at 03:00 ship time. "They want you on Earth," she said without preamble. "Parade, medals, the whole circus. President says humanity needs its heroes visible." Kai didn't turn. "Tell the president some heroes are better left in the dark." Chun was quiet a long time. "They're calling it victory," she said finally. But the Kelthar hardliners had allies, rogue hives, mercenary clans. Some of them slipped the net. And the Harrow, she stopped. Kai finished for her. "Still coming." "Yes." He looked at the plaque. "Then the war's not over." "No," she admitted. "It just changed shape." Kai reached into his pocket and pulled out the dead man's switch, jarred, cracked, but intact. The technicians had removed the detonator, turned it into a relic. He set it gently beneath the plaque like an offering. "Good," he said. Chun studied him. "What happens now, Sergeant?" Kai looked out the small porthole at the stars, cold, ancient, indifferent, and somehow kinder than they had been before. "Now," he said, "we stop reacting. We start hunting." He turned to her, and for the first time since the fire, his eyes held something colder than pain. "Find me a ship, Admiral. Something fast, something quiet. I've got 14 debts to collect, and the galaxy's a big place." Chun smiled, the slow, dangerous smile of a woman who had once watched a rock full of madmen burn itself to cinders rather than surrender. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said. "There's a new unit forming. Black Ops, no insignia, no oversight. They're calling it the Ash Legion." Kai's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "Perfect." He touched the plaque one last time, fingers lingering on Amira's name. "See you soon, poet," he whispered. Outside the porthole, a sleek courier frigate detached from Invictus Reborn, running lights dimmed to a predator's glow. On her hull, fresh paint still wet, someone had stenciled a single line in crimson. "The war was over, we just didn't care." The frigate turned toward the deep black, engines whispering acceleration. Behind her, the chapel lights dimmed to candle glow. And in the silence that followed, 14 names seemed to burn brighter than any star. Far away, in the voids between galaxies, something vast and hungry paused, as though it had heard a sound it did not yet understand. The sound of boots marching. The sound of humans who had already died once, and discovered death had no hold on them anymore. The Ash Legion was coming, and the Dark had every reason to be afraid. They gave him a ship that had no name, only a hull number, X66. She was long, black and wrong-looking, a dagger forged from stealth composites and old sins. Her corridors smelled of fresh paint and fresh fear. The crew called her Widowmaker behind the officers' backs. Kai let them. Names have power, and widows know how to keep secrets. He stood on her bridge for the first time in a fresh uniform that still had creases sharp enough to cut. No rank tabs. No unit patch. Just a small black ribbon on the left breast, 14 knots, one for each name on the chapel wall. The bridge crew watched him like he was a ghost who'd forgotten to lie down. Kai didn't speak until the ship cleared the Invictus Reborn, a shadow, and the stars opened up like judgment. Then he turned to them, 47 souls handpicked from the broken edges of the war. Men and women who had lost everything and discovered that losing everything left room for something harder. "My name is Kai Morgan," he said. "Some of you heard I died. I got better. The people who didn't get better are why we're here." He let that settle. "Our job is simple. There are Kelthar who think the treaty is paper. There are humans who sold their souls for alien coin. There are things coming from outside the light that Havenda learned what humans do when we recornered." He stepped forward until he was close enough for them to see the burn scars that crept above his collar like white flames. "We are going to teach them, slowly, personally, and with great enthusiasm." A low ripple of laughter, dark, hungry, familiar. The helmsman, a wiry woman from the Venusian cloud cities named Lieutenant Rowe, raised an eyebrow. "Rules of engagement, sir?" Kai smiled the way winter smiles. "There are no rules. There is only the mission. And the mission is this. Every traitor dies screaming. Every rogue hive burns. Every meter of space we take back stays ours forever." He paused. "And if the Harrow wants to test us, we'll give them Sigma-12 all over again. Only bigger. Silence." Then Rowe grinned, shark bright. "Welcome aboard, Sergeant." The first mission came down from Chun herself, encrypted so hard it made the comms officer weep. Target: rogue Kelthar matriarch, styling herself the widow of Vera. She had refused the treaty, taken 3 colony worlds, and was building something ugly in the nebula called the Veil of Sorrows. Objective: terminate with extreme prejudice. Secondary objective: retrieve any data on Harrow sightings. Kai read the orders once, then fed them into the recycler. Set course for the Veil, he told Rail. And tell engineering I want the black hole torpedo awake. Weapon had been theoretical once, then someone built it. Then someone else classified it so deep the file had teeth. 10 to 66 carried one. Just one. Enough to turn a star inside out, if you were feeling poetic. They dropped out of fold space on the edge of the Veil like a knife sliding into silk. The nebula was beautiful in the way only killing grounds can be: purple plasma storms, ghost lightning, the bones of 1,000 ships drifting in slow motion. The widow of Virov's fleet hung at its heart, 30 hive cruisers arranged around a moon-sized construct that pulsed with the same gold-veined black as the choir stone. Kai felt the old hate rise, clean and pure. Contact, sensors called. They see us. On the main hala, a Kelthar matriarch appeared, ancient, scarred, her translator voice like grinding glass. Human ghost, she hissed. You are late to your grave. Kai leaned forward. I was busy. Send my regards to the choir stone. Tell it I brought friends. The matriarch's mandibles flared. You will join your dead. Kai killed the channel. All hands, he said calmly. Battle stations. Let's remind them why they lost the first war. X-66 moved like a predator that had already won. Stealth fields bent light around her until she was a hole in space. Rail lances spoke in perfect silence. The outer picket died without knowing what killed them. They were inside the defensive sphere before the widow realized the ghost was real. Kai stood in the torpedo bay himself, hand on the black hole warhead. It was cold as judgment. Time to breach? He asked. 40 seconds, sir. He keyed the all-ship intercom. Listen up. In 30 seconds we're going to punch a hole straight to hell and walk through it smiling. Some of you won't come back. That's fine. The ones who stay behind get to tell the story. Make it a good one. He paused. And if any of you see a woman with a Persian accent and a broken arm, tell her I'm late for dinner. Laughter real, warm, the sound of people who had stopped fearing death and started fearing failure instead. The torpedo launched. Space folded, screamed, and tore open. X-66 rode the shockwave straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Kai led the boarding teams himself, black armor, no insignia, only the knotted ribbon fluttering like a battle standard. They cut through Kelthar warriors like wrath-made flesh. In the core chamber they found it, another choir stone, smaller but singing already. The matriarch waited beneath it, blades dripping. You are persistent insects, she said. Kai raised his rifle. It's a gift. They fought in the stone song sound that tried to unmake minds, tried to fill them with despair and surrender. Kai felt Amira die again. Felt Connor burn. Felt every grave he dug. He kept walking. The matriarch lunged, faster than anything that size should move. Kai met her blade with his own. Steel rang. Sparks fell like slow stars. You should have stayed dead, she snarled. Kai smiled through blood. Death didn't want me. Said I was too stubborn. He drove his knife into the joint behind her primary heart. The matriarch screamed a sound that cracked bulkheads. Kai twisted the blade. For Sigma-12, he whispered. She died with his name on her mandibles. The choir stone song reached crescendo. Kai looked at his teammate left out of 20. He looked at the stone. He looked at the knotted ribbon on his chest. Then he did the most human thing possible. He laughed. Plant the charges, he ordered. We're taking this song home with us. They wired the stone with every gram of antimatter on the ship. On the way out, Kai paused at the matriarch's corpse. He cut a talon-free long, curved, beautiful in its cruelty. Souvenir. X-66 limped away from the veil trailing fire and glory. Behind her, the nebula bloomed into a second sun as the choir stone imploded, taking the widow's fleet and half the nebula with it. On the bridge, Rao turned to Kai, face streaked with blood and awe. Sir, the Harrow just lost another scout fleet near Andromeda. Same signature as the big one. They're closer. Kai cleaned the talon with a rag, slow and deliberate. Good, he said. He pinned the talon beneath the plaque that now hung on X-66's bridge. 14 names, and one fresh addition, Widow of Vera. Plot course for the Andromeda Gap, he ordered. Wake me when we're in range. Rao hesitated. Sir, that's a one-way trip. Even with full drives. Kai looked at her with eyes that had already died twice. Then we'll be early. He walked to his cabin, small, Spartan, a single candle burning beneath a photograph of 14 smiling ghosts. He knelt, not in surrender. In preparation. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled and waited. Somewhere in the deep, something ancient felt the approach of a very small ship full of very angry humans, and for the first time in a billion years, it wondered if it had made a mistake. The X-66 fell through the dark between galaxies like a thrown spear. No stars. No planets. Only the faint, bruised glow of ancient light that had been traveling since before Earth learned fire. The crew called it the Quiet. They spoke the word the way sailors once spoke of doldrums. Half superstition, half prayer. 311 days out of the Milky Way, the ship began to change. First it was small things. A candle in Kai's cabin refused to gutter no matter how low the oxygen dipped. The plaque with the 15 names, 14 human, 1 Kelther Talon, grew warm to the touch at 030 ship time every night. Then the dreams started. Every sleeper on board dreamed the same dream, a desert of black glass under a sky with no stars. In the distance, 14 figures walked toward a light that hurt to look at. Amira was always at the front, arm no longer broken, singing something too beautiful to remember when you woke. They woke gasping, smiling, terrified. Kai kept the dreams to himself for 31 days. On the 32nd, Lieutenant Rao found him in the chapel compartment, really just a storage locker with a crucifix welded to the bulkhead, staring at the candle like it owed him answers. Permission to speak freely, sir. Always. The crew thinks we're being followed. Kai didn't laugh. By what? By them. She nodded toward the plaque. By Sigma-12. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I know, he said finally. Rao swallowed. Orders? Keep flying. They didn't come all this way to sightsee. On day 412, the quiet broke. Sensors screamed. Something vast eclipsed the cosmic microwave background, a moving shadow the size of a galactic arm. The Harrow had found them. Kai was on the bridge in seconds, barefoot, still pulling on his jacket. The Hala bloomed, a structure of angles that refused to stay still, black surfaces drinking light, gold veins pulsing like infected arteries. It wasn't a ship. It was geometry gone malignant. Rao's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white on the helm. Range 2 light days and closing. They're singing, sir. Same harmonic as the choir stones, but deeper. It's in the hull. In our teeth. Kai felt it too. A pressure behind the eyes. A whisper that everything was pointless, that humanity was a rounding error in an indifferent universe. He had heard that song before. He had died to it twice. He looked at the plaque. The candle beneath it was burning blue. Kai smiled, small, tired, and absolutely without fear. Battle stations, he said softly. Wake the torpedo. Engineering reported the black hole warhead was already hot. Something had armed it in the night. Kai didn't ask questions. He opened all ship instead. Crew of X-66. 412 days ago we left home with one purpose, to make the dark regret noticing us. Looks like we succeeded. Laughter rippled across the net, thin, fierce, proud. We are one ship, they are. Whatever the hell that is, doesn't matter. We have something they don't. He paused. We have promises to keep. The Harrow accelerated impossible physics-breaking acceleration. 2 light days became 1, became half. Kai gave the order no one wanted to hear. Ramming speed. Ro looked at him, eyes shining. Aye, sir. Ramming speed. X-66 turned her knife-blade prow toward the impossible thing, and poured power into engines never meant to burn this hard. The song grew louder, trying to unmake them, trying to fill their minds with every regret, every failure, every grave. Kai felt Connor die again, felt Amira's hand go cold, felt the moment he released the dead man switch the second time. He kept his eyes open. He began to sing, not well, not in tune. Just the same stubborn hymn that had ridden Sigma-12 into glory. One by one, 47 voices joined him. Off-P raw, human. The Harrow flinched. The distance collapsed. At the last second, Kai keyed the torpedo release and cut main engines. 10 to 66 coasted the final 1,000 kilometers on momentum and prayer. The black hole warhead struck the Harrow's outer shell and opened like a flower made of endings. For one eternal instant, nothing happened. Then reality tore. A hole appeared in space, not black, but absence, absolute nothing. The Harrow folded into it the way paper folds into fire, gold veins screaming as they unraveled. 10 to 66 was too close. Gravity waves slapped the ship like the fist of an angry god. Hull plates buckled. Atmosphere vented in silver plumes. Kai was thrown against the forward viewport. Through bleeding eyes he watched the Harrow die, watched something older than galaxies come apart in perfect silence. And in that silence he saw them. 14 figures standing in the tier, backlit by a light that had no source. Amira raised her hand not in goodbye, but in salute. The candle on the bridge flared white. The tier closed. The quiet returned, gentler now, almost kind. X-66 drifted, dead in space, but intact. When the rescue beacon finally pinged a reply 3 years later, a joint human-Kelthar survey ship on the long road home, they found 46 survivors in hibernation and one body that refused to cool. Kai Morgan sat in the chapel locker, eyes closed, a smile on his burned face. The blue candle still burning, though there was no oxygen left to feed it. In his hand he held the Kelthar talon and Amira's silver cross, braided together with a new knot. On the plaque, someone had added a 15th name in fresh weld. Kai Morgan, he kept the promise. The survey crew buried him in deep space with full honors human, and Kelthar standing shoulder to shoulder, enemies no more. They left the candle burning. They say if you sail far enough out, past the last galaxy, you can still see it. One steady blue flame in the dark between everything. Sailors claim that when the void feels too heavy, when the night is too long, that flame burns a little brighter. And sometimes, if you listen very carefully, you can hear singing. Not the Harrow's song, ours. The war was over. But the humans, dead and living, kept the light anyway. They buried Kai Morgan in the place where galaxies end. No planet, no star. Only the perfect dark that exists when light itself has grown tired. The Joint Honor Guard, human Marines in dress blacks and Kelthar honor blades in ceremonial white chiton, formed a silent ring around the open torpedo tube that served as a coffin. Rear Admiral Chun Wei, hair now completely silver, spoke the words no one had prepared. He wasn't trying to win the war, she said, voice carrying through every speaker on both ships. He was trying to make sure the dark remembered our names. The Kelthar matriarch, who had once been an enemy, now ambassador, her carapace scarred with the same gold veins the Harrow had worn, lowered her head in respect. In our tongue, she clicked softly, there is a word for what he became, Ashvara. The fire that refuses to die when the fuel is gone. She placed a single, choir stone fragment, black glass shot through with human gold, on Kai's chest beside the braided cross and talon. Then they fired him into the void. The torpedo drifted for 3 heartbeats. Then the candle that had no business burning in vacuum flared once, blue-white fierce, and the torpedo vanished. Not exploded. Simply ceased, as though the universe had opened a door and politely closed it again. Every sensor on both ships went blind for 6 full seconds. When picture returned, the dark was different. A single point of blue light hung where Kai had been, steady, unmoving, growing no closer, growing no farther. Just there. The fleet scientists called it impossible. called it a quantum candle, a probability echo, a grief-induced hallucination. They wrote papers, they argued. The crews called it something else. They called it the Morgan Light. Pilots on the long haul between galaxies started plotting courses by it. When full drives misaligned and crews woke up screaming from the quiet, they looked for the blue flame and recentered their souls. Children born on deep space stations learned a new nursery rhyme. When the night is long and the stars forget your name, look for the blue fire that burns without flame. A sergeant stands there with 14 at his side, and the road finds you again, because humans never died. Years became decades. The Harrow never came. Scout fleets sent toward the intergalactic void found only silence and the Morgan Light, steady as a promise. Some came back claiming they heard singing on Type Beam. Others came back weeping and refused to speak at all. On Earth, in the rebuilt halls of the Terran Legion Academy, cadets saluted a statue. A man in burned armor, one hand raised not in victory but in warning, keep going. Behind him, 14 ghosts and 1 alien talon were carved in eternal vigil. Every year on the anniversary of the second burning of Sigma-12, every ship in the fleet, human, Kelthar, and the dozen species that had joined the Accord since, dimmed lights for 6 minutes. The exact length of time the sensors went blind when Kai left. Then they turned toward the blue flame between galaxies and fired a single salute gun. The sound never reached the void. The light always brightened in answer. 187 years after the burial, a child was born on a colony ship halfway to Andromeda. She opened her eyes, storm gray, like burnt gun oil, and the first thing she saw was the Morgan Light through the nursery viewport. The midwife, an old Kelthar drone whose shell was painted with human roses, clicked in surprise. The child reached out one tiny fist toward the blue flame and laughed, clear, unafraid, ancient. Later, when they asked her name, she spoke with a voice that hadn't been heard in 2 centuries. "Call me Amira," she said. And somewhere, in the perfect dark that is not empty, a candle burned brighter. The war was over. But the watch never ended. Because somewhere between the galaxies, a sergeant and his platoon still stand guard, rifles made of memory and will, keeping the road open for everyone who comes after. They have all the time in the universe. And humans, as it turns out, are very good at forever. The child named Amira grew up on a ship that had no destination, only direction. The colony Ark Second Dawn was a city of 3 million souls pointed toward a galaxy that might not want them. For 18 years she walked its corridors barefoot, speaking 3 human languages and 2 Kelthar dialects before breakfast, fixing grav plates with one hand and quoting Persian poetry with the other. People said she had old eyes. They were right. On the night of her 18th birthday, the Ark dropped out of fold space for routine maintenance, and the Morgan Light filled every viewport on the starboard side, closer than it had ever been, close enough that the blue flame looked like a door. Amira stood alone in Observation Ring 7, palm pressed to the transparisteel, heart hammering against her ribs like it remembered dying. The flame pulsed once. A voice, not sound, but memory, spoke inside her skull, gentle and smoke-rough. "Late as usual, poet." She laughed until she cried, and the tears floated in perfect spheres because the ring's gravity was offline. The ship's captain found her there an hour later, still staring. "Orders, ma'am?" the captain asked, half joking. She was only 29, young for the chair, but she had learned to recognize something holy when it stood in front of her. Amira wiped her face. "Change course. Follow the light. Man, that vector leads to nothing. No stars, no resources. I know what it leads to," Amira said softly. "Home." The captain looked into those storm-gray eyes and discovered she would follow this girl into the mouth of God himself if asked. She gave the order. The entire Ark turned, 3 million souls and 1 impossible blue star, and began the long burn toward the Morgan Light. They were not the first. Over the decades, others had come, refugee convoys, broken battle groups, pilgrim ships carrying nothing but hope and children. Every one of them found the same thing when they reached the flame: a road. Not metaphor, not faith. A literal pathway of blue-white energy stretching across the void like a bridge forged from pure will, stable, breathable, warm as sunlight on Martian sand. Ships sailed it the way ancient caravans once followed starlight across deserts. At its center, where the Morgan light burned brightest, stood Outpost Sigma-12, not rebuilt, restored. The rock was scarred, cracked, perfect. The mural still bled paint from old bullet holes. Cathedral deck still smelled of ozone and candle wax. Reactor 3 still coughed like an old smoker, but it coughed in rhythm now, like a heartbeat. 14 ghosts and 1 living sergeant waited on the main concourse. Kai Morgan had not aged a day. The burns were still there, white and livid, but his eyes were young. He wore the same uniform he died in, ribbons still knotted with 15 threads. When Amira stepped through the airlock, barefoot, 18, terrified, and grinning like sunrise, Kai saluted with 2 fingers to the brow. "Took you long enough," he said. She ran the last 10 meters and hit him hard enough to stagger a normal man. He wasn't normal anymore. "You kept the light on," she whispered into his shoulder. "Promised I would." Behind her, 3 million colonists poured onto the outpost that should not have room for 300. Space folded, gentle, and accommodating. Corridors lengthened, decks multiplied. The rock breathed like a living thing and made room the way love always does. Children laughed. Kelther clicked in wonder. Someone started singing the old hymn, and 10,000 voices answered until the stars themselves seemed to harmonize. Kai walked Amira to Cathedral deck. The spinal rail cannon was gone, replaced by something vast and quiet, a gateway of blue fire that looked out onto every galaxy at once. Beyond it, the Harrow's remnants drifted broken, blind, harmless. Something had torn the hunger out of them and left only silence. Kai rested a hand on the edge of the gate. "This is the watch," he said, "not a place. A choice. We stand here so no one else ever has to die afraid in the dark again." Amira looked at the 14 who stood with him, Thorn straight-backed and proud. O'Malley with her red hair still smelling of gun smoke, Park grinning like a kid who'd stolen heaven. They looked solid, real, eternal. "Will you stay?" Thorn asked, voice gentle. Amira looked back at the river of living people still pouring inhumanity in its allies, wounded and hopeful, carrying babies and seeds and songs. She looked at Kai. She took his hand. "Always," she said. Years stopped having meaning. The outpost grew into a city, then a nation, then something language has no name for. Ships came and went along the road of blue fire. Children were born who had never known fear of the dark because the dark had learned better. And every night, in the quiet hours when even eternity rests, Kai Morgan and Amira Reza walked the outer ring together. He never asked how she came back. She never asked how he stayed. Some truths are bigger than questions. One night, if night is a word that still applies, Amira leaned against the railing and watched new ships arrive, sleek, strange, carrying species no one had ever catalogued. "Look at them," she whispered. They heard about the light and came running. Kai slipped an arm around her shoulders. "That's what humans do," he said. "We get knocked down, we get back up. We leave the door open and the light on for whoever's still lost." She turned to him, eyes shining with starlight and tears. "Is the war finally over, Kai?" He considered the question the way a man considers the horizon. "No," he said at last. "But it lost the only battle that ever mattered." He kissed her forehead, gentle as forgiveness. Out beyond the gate, the road of blue fire stretched on endless, welcoming, alive. And at its heart, 15 ghosts and 1 girl who had died and come home stood watch together, rifles made of memory, hearts made of stubborn, unbreakable love. They had all the time in the universe, and they spent every second of it keeping the promise humanity was born to keep, that no matter how dark the night, no matter how long the road, no matter how far we have to go alone, the light stays on, the door stays open. And a human voice will always, always answer when you call. The war was over. But the humans, living, dead, and everything in between, kept fighting anyway. Not with guns anymore. With hope. And hope, it turns out, is the one thing the dark can never kill.